Hello and welcome to another video, and today it's a special day. I'm finally sitting down to review Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It feels like this game came out 2 years ago. That's how long it's taken me to get through it. I'll be completely 100% honest. I had a lot of stuff happen in the last 2 months that has pushed back me finishing this game. A lot of different weekends I'd be like, all right, this is the weekend. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to finish this game. I'm going to power through it. And then bam, something, came up either family wise or, something, in the household or whatever it be. But it took me fucking forever to get to the end of this game. I'm happy to be on the other side of it now and I can talk about it freely. This is going to be a full review of the game. I am going to talk heavily about spoilers. I will let you know when I get to that part of the review that it is a spoiler part of it. But please note that part of the spoiler here is it's a 25-plus-year-old game being remade, and the biggest spoiler I can give for the game, most people already know what that is. So I will throw out spoiler when I get to the end because I have a lot to say about a specific part of this game, and that's a heavy part of this review. But let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So we should probably recap what I thought about Final Fantasy Remake, which is the first part of this 3-part remake for Final Fantasy VII. Again, announced in 2015 at the, I believe it was the first Year of Dreams PlayStation E3 event. They finally said, hey, we're going to do it. You badgered us for years. We're going to remake Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII, arguably one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, if not one of the greatest video games of all time. So a lot of people wanted this game. A lot of people wanted this remake ever since they showed that PS3 demo in 2006, which was literally just a tech demo. People have been begging for a remake of Final Fantasy VII, and they decided to give that to us in 2020 finally with Final Fantasy VII Remake. But it was part one of at that time, it was undecided how many parts this project would be. We now know that it will be a 3-part project. And they had said, okay, this is where we're going to end part one. And then they came out maybe like 6 months before Rebirth came out and said, okay, this is where part 2 is going to end. Part 3 will be the rest of it. So as far as Remake goes, I love the hell out of Remake. You can go watch my video review of it on the channel. I'll link it in this video. Gosh, it'll be kind of weird because you're going back 4 years in time. But it was a great game that took what I went into thinking, well, this is only like the first 10 hours, if that, of this video game and stretched it into a 50-hour complete RPG. So I was even more excited to get to this part of the Final Fantasy VII story because this is where it opens up. This is where the world is, basically the world's your oyster. You can do what you want. Obviously things are gated off until a certain point, but there's a lot of exploration. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. And let me tell you, if there's one word I can use to describe Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it is overwhelming. They have crammed an overwhelming amount of things to do, be it side quests, be it activities, story beats, whatever. It is so overwhelming with content. I will fully admit I did not finish every side quest in this game. My play count when I was done was about 72 hours. And I feel like I could easily double that, if not dump another 100 hours into this game and 200% it if I wanted to. I don't know if I'll do that, but there is so much content in this game. It's ridiculous how much they put into it. So much that I question now how much is going to be into part 3, the final chapter of this Final Fantasy saga, as we're going to call it now. Final Fantasy VII Saga. I will also say you've heard it here first, folks, but my prediction for the title for part 3 is Final Fantasy VII Reunion, because they fucking say the words reunion in this game about 117 times. So almost can guarantee you that's the title for the third game, and it would make sense. Remake, Rebirth, Reunion. I think that's a good way to go. The combat has been vastly improved here. I talked about in my early impressions video. I think that the combat is even better here. I like the little aspects here, such as, yeah, your party's only 3 people like the original Final Fantasy VII, but the extra party members that are not in your active party are on the sidelines of the battle, and they actually are helping out a little bit. Like, they're not going to do enough damage to kill an enemy, but they will. Like, for example, if you have Baird on the sidelines, he's shooting with his arm gun. You know, you have Aerith on the sideline, she's using spells with her wand. Like, there is that aspect to it that I think is really awesome. There's little things like that in the game that just make it, you know, that much more special. And the other part of it is like visiting these places for the first time in a remake that is, what, you know, 4 generations ahead of the original game in terms of console hardware is incredible. Just the opening of the game, the different towns that you go to, you remember these beats from the original Final Fantasy VII. The biggest standout for me is going to be Costa del Sol. That's one of my favorite parts of the original Final Fantasy VII. It's done to perfection here. The other part of the game that I really enjoyed was seeing those specific scenes. You know, the famous "Did Sephiroth do this?" scene is handled really, really well here. And those like specific pivotal scenes, for the most part, and I want to stress that because we're going to get into that in the spoiler section of this review, most of the pivotal scenes that you remember from this game are handled with extreme care and handled very, very well. There is something I got to nitpick, and we're going to talk about that heavily when we get to spoilers. All the voice acting is incredible. The one thing I will say that is jarring, this is a very, very minor spoiler, but if you think about it, you know, it makes sense. And that is the voice of Red 13. I had totally forgotten that there is, again, spoiler, the character of Red 13 is actually not this like wise old animal. He's actually a young kid, and when that happens, there is a shift. And again, when the original Final Fantasy VII came out in 97, there wasn't voice acting, so you did all the voices in your head, right? And in this case, there is a voice change from, you know, the wise voice that you would expect to this childlike voice, and it's jarring at first. And after that, you kind of have that voice for the rest of the game, so you got to get used to that. But again, no fault there. And I think the voice acting for pretty much everything is incredible. I especially enjoyed, even though they're not playable, Sid. I loved his voice acting in the game. He's got this southern accent, I think, that just fits the character wonderfully. And Matt Mercer does an excellent job with the little bit that Vincent Valentine is in this game. Again, these are 2 characters that are not playable in this game, but they will be in the final part, kind of like Red 13 wasn't playable in the first part of this. And it is important to note Red 13 is fully playable character in this game. Also, Kate Sith, who has like a Scottish/Irish accent, and I did not expect that, but I grew to love that accent throughout the entire game. Just there's so many things about it that really, really resonated with me. And that's why, like, I look at it as a whole package and I go, man, 90% of this game, maybe 95% of it is just firing on every cylinder I would want it to fire on. And I even with my nitpicks, which we're going to get to at the end, for right now in April, this is my game of the year to beat because I had so much fun playing the game. And I have to nitpick the end, because the end of this game is, they do something, they go somewhere and they do something. It is and is not the ending that you would expect. And I think that's the important thing to note. So, but yeah. So if you don't want to know spoilers, you can skip to the end of this video. I'll give you my letter grade on the game, what I thought of it overall. Obviously I recommend it. If you played the first part of it, you're not going to not play the second part of this. And if you're a mega fan of Final Fantasy VII, there's no way you didn't already play this. So I know my review of this game is coming out incredibly late, and I apologize for that. But yeah, everything else, I think visually the game looks stunning. I'm so happy that this game was a PS5 only game. They didn't cater to making it a PS4 game as well, because I think that would have really hurt it. There's especially some stuff that happens at the end of the game, and a lot of the visuals you just look at and go, this wouldn't work on a PS4. So I think the game looks tremendous visually. The soundtrack is incredible. If there's one gripe I have to say is there are sometimes, at least for me, and I did see other people complain about this, it seems like it might be a Dolby Atmos thing, which I have a Dolby Atmos soundbar, but there are times in the game, at least for me, where the voice acting was not balanced very well with the soundtrack. So you'd get pivotal scenes where the soundtrack was actually louder than, the voice acting, the people talking, and that could get annoying at times. But again, that's more of my problem because it's a Dolby Atmos thing, and most people out there probably don't have Dolby Atmos surround when they're playing video games. I don't know. Yeah, let's dive into the major spoiler section of this, because that's the meat of this that I want to talk about. And again, heavy spoilers for this going forward starting now. So obviously one of the big things about Final Fantasy VII being a beloved game that everybody, I don't know anybody that, even if you don't like a JRPG, you know of Final Fantasy VII, you know of the story, and there's a pivotal death in the middle of Final Fantasy VII that is, to this day, still resonates with gamers. It's an insane thing. It was an insane thing that happened at the time that the video game came out, because it was a very unheard of thing to do in a video game, and then it just resonated for 25 years, plus years. I mean, this game still resonates with people. Every character is so well written in Final Fantasy VII that I think it is one of the true timeless stories in video games. But anyways, the death, of course, I'm talking about is the death of Aerith. Very pivotal scene in the original Final Fantasy VII. I don't like how it's handled here. So the biggest thing we have to talk about when we talk about Rebirth is at the end of Final Fantasy Remake, Zack Fair is still alive, supposedly, that he didn't die. And the way Final Fantasy Rebirth starts, actually, you are playing as Zack, and it's a very what the fuck is going on? This isn't Final Fantasy VII type of moment until it then shifts the story back over to Cloud. I wasn't expecting that. And there are moments throughout the game where you'll get these kind of sections where it's all of a sudden you're going back and you're playing as Zack, and it seems like it's set in the same timeline, but maybe not. Events are happening, but they're happening a little bit different. There are also events that happen in this game to completely different characters. Completely. It's kind of fucking crazy. And the big reveal kind of at the end, quote unquote reveal, and I use the word reveal very loosely, is when you are talking to Sephiroth, he reveals that there are other worlds, aka a multiverse. And I don't like that because the multiverse is a idea that's incredibly fucking overused in media today. Marvel has beaten it to death. DC has beaten it to death. Movies have beaten it to death. And now we're throwing it into a remake of a 25-year-old game that, frankly, I don't think needs it. You could still remake the entirety of Final Fantasy VII, and it's going to resonate with a new audience without having to add this new twist into it. But it's revealed that there are quote unquote separate worlds, and these worlds, there's one that Zack is on, and he's still alive, and there's also one that Aerith is on, and she's still alive. So what this ends up doing is for me at least, is it undercuts the importance of Aerith's death, because yes, you do get that scene. She is killed by Sephiroth. It's not like they don't do it, but she's still, after her death, able to communicate to Cloud. And they have this scene at the very, very end of the game, which I will say, visually, this was one of the most impressive cutscenes I've ever seen in a video game up to this point in video game history. But the scene is incredibly questionable because it's he can have a conversation with her, but nobody else sees her because he has the ability now to see this other, world. They talk about don't look up in the sky. It's going to look weird. And I don't like that part of this because my gut feeling, what they're going to do. And again, this is just a prediction. This is just a gut feeling. It doesn't mean this is actually going to happen, but I feel like we're going to get to the third part of this game. And at the end, he's going to be able to pull Aerith and Zack through their respective worlds or realms into this one so that their deaths actually didn't happen. And that undermines a big part of what makes Final Fantasy VII a incredibly special game, in my opinion. Aerith's death needs to mean something, and by doing this multiverse thing at the end, it undermines the importance of that death, you know, in a very big way. Yes, they still have all the other characters standing there mourning the death of Aerith, but why? You know, like, why are we going to undermine it for some multiverse bullshit that doesn't need to be in the game? I also hated the fact at the end where they teased her death like 3 different times. They stretch it out way too fucking long. Like, there's this incredibly long cutscene / walk and talk part of the end of the game that drags way too long for this, where it's like, at one point I was like, let's just get the death over with, man. Like, we don't need to keep doing this. And that part of it, it drags the game down for me. It really does, because at the end of the game, you know, at the end of the day, it's a sum of its parts, right? Like, and I have to like every part, much like, you know, Last of Us 2, although I don't think this is as big of a deal to me, because again, Last of Us Part 2 was, I hated the story, and that's fundamentally the first thing you're doing by playing that game, is you want to experience the story. With Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you have a game where like 95% of the game's story is done identical and great. It's this other 5% I dislike. And because of the end, because of what they do at the end of this, by involving a multiverse, by undermining the death of Aerith in this way, for me, and this ends the spoiler part, I'm giving the game a B+. I would have given it an A-. That's where I was at, like, the entire time. Like, A- is so easy to score. But because of the end, it pushed it down to a B+ for me, and it actually makes me kind of worried about the third part of this game, if I'm being frank, because again, if the prediction I'm making for what they're going to do is true, if that's my theory, that's not Final Fantasy VII to me. That's a completely different game, and that's not what most people signed up for. They signed up for a remake. I think this is going to be one of the most controversial releases of the year for people that, you know, actually sat through and finished it. I mean, my God, it's a 100-hour RPG. They weren't lying when they said there was enough content to fill 100 hours. You know, a lot of times you look at that with a grain of salt, maybe not. No, they're not lying when it comes to that here in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, that's my final grade for the game. It's a B+. I'd love to know in the comments below. The game's been out for 2 months now. What do you guys think about it? I will also say on the next episode of Podcast 572, which I'll remind you is now a video podcast as well, Dan and I are going to have a huge spoiler discussion about it now that we finally can. And I'm very interested now that I've made it through and he has made it through to talk about it on the other side of things here, because I'm pretty sure he feels the same way that I do about the end of the game. So anyways, guys, look forward to that later this week. Hope you enjoyed this video review. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time.